Hello, and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. Today's podcast number 1682. The topic is mindset, and the title is Mental Health Issues Related to Living a Healthier Lifestyle, Part 2. So, 4 podcasts ago, we did Part 1. I started into it and realized it was going to take way too long to cover everything I wanted to, so we decided to kind of split it into a Part 1 and Part 2. What we talked about in podcast 1678 was that mental health is a huge aspect. I mean, just I don't even know how to properly put it into words. That's how significant of an impact it has on us living a healthy lifestyle compared to just knowing what to do. To get like a nutrition program, training program, like to get the what of what to do is one challenge. But I feel like that's the easier challenge. The harder challenge is, how do you do it? How do we implement it into our life? So we talked about in the last podcast that people struggle with motivation and self-discipline. They struggle with body image and self-esteem. And they struggle with a perfectionist or like an all or nothing type mindset. That's what we covered in the last podcast. And we discussed that those mental health issues can negatively impact your overall health and like implementing healthy things into your life, because you're not going to want to work out if you don't have motivation to do so. You're not going to eat healthy if you don't have self-discipline. You're not going to want to go to the gym maybe if you have poor body image. You're going to be like, I don't want people to see me, Self-esteem, you're just not going to want to do anything because I'm a piece of crap. Why do I even try? I fail everything I do. Ugh, right? That's not good. So there's challenges that are internal. Not so much the what to do, but the how to what to do it. That's the challenge. So I want to continue to talk today. And all of these topics came from kind of a collection of things that I discuss with clients. And I wanted to say that because I want people to realize you're not alone. If you're struggling with motivation, with self-discipline, body image, self-esteem, perfectionist, that's so common. Unfortunately, it's very common. I talk about it all the time with clients. I laugh because I probably don't make podcasts often enough because it's so personal that a lot of what I discuss with the clients would be inappropriate to expand out, into a podcast. So I have to get in the practice of doing it, maybe do it in a more general way, or just share my own struggles. I don't mind sharing mine, but it's common. If you're struggling with any of these things, you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just normal. But it's something that we do have to work to overcome if we want to be successful. Okay, we're going to start today now, continuing down the list. The next thing that I have on my list, and none of these are in like a certain order, just kind of wrote them down as I saw them, is anxiety and stress. If you struggle with anxiety, if you struggle with stress, you're gonna be overwhelmed with managing that. And what you're gonna feel is that you're overwhelmed with what you already have. And implementing healthy nutrition habits, implementing healthy exercise habits is just going to seem like more stress. And it's true. That's actually a true thing. So you're not lying to yourself. Is to have to change all of my eating habits to now eat healthier sounds like a lot of work. You're right. Yep. It is. It is work, which is why you don't want to do it. I understand that. I'm the same damn way. I'm human. I have the same things. There are days I don't want to work out. Imagine that. I own a gym. I have devoted a significant amount of my life, stress, anxiety, money, time, all of those things, so I can have a gym. Very blessed. Very grateful for everybody that helped me. But there are still days when I'm like, oh gosh, I'm too tired to train. And that's just, it happens. Like, we are so busy navigating all the regular shit that we don't want to add more shit. That's basically the thing. I have enough. I'm full of shit. So you just don't want to add any more. I understand that completely. So it's important to recognize that that's a normal human emotion. What we have to do then is we have to organize how we handle what we handle now to make space to handle more. But thankfully, the more will be good things. The more will be stuff that progresses us, that improves us, our health. It can actually improve our capacity to handle crap. Is if I feel better by eating better, if by eating better I get better sleep, if by eating better I get better sleep, I have better daily energy, and I feel better about the way I look, all of a sudden I can be more proactive, I can do more things, and it can increase our capacity to handle shit. Wouldn't that be great? You can have more shit. Probably need to stop cussing so much. But it's a good thing, but it is a challenging thing. So stress management is overwhelmingly just an invaluable skill set. It's an invaluable ability to learn. We have a lot of podcasts on stress because it is so common. A good one that we did recently was podcast 1547. It's a mindset podcast titled Minimize Stress by Doing the Minimum. It's a play on words, but by learning what's the least you have to do, it can help you do what you need to do, but create the capacity to do more, which will be the healthy eating and the exercise. And then, as I said, if you get the healthy eating and the exercise built in there, all of a sudden you'll increase your ability to handle more even over time. So you have to make space if you want to add things, right? You can think of your life like this 24 hours is a finite amount of time. You can jam as much as you possibly can into 24 hours, but eventually there's a limit. Eventually you cannot get more time. There is a limit, 24. So if I want to add things to my life, it'll probably be easier for me to do so by making space, by maybe removing other things or making other things more efficient so there's more space. Think about if you're trying to pack a suitcase for a vacation. Maybe the first, if you put 7 pair of underwear, 7 shorts, 7 shirts, 7 socks, 7 pairs of socks, hopefully. But you put in the base. That's easy, right? You could close the lid and you could zip that sucker up, no problem. But then you're like, well, maybe I need pants and shorts. Maybe I need t-shirts and sweatshirts. Well, these shoes don't go with everything, so maybe I'm going to take 2 or 3 pairs of shoes. All of a sudden, you're sitting on the suitcase trying to zip that sucker up, trying to smash it all in there, right? It becomes harder and harder and harder to close a suitcase. That's what happens in our life. The more we try to jam in, it becomes harder and harder and harder to mentally manage, to mentally stay in control, right? So we need to learn how to minimize what we already do, make space within what we already do if we want to add stuff. Overwhelmingly, that's a big kind of misconception is concept, I guess. Missed concept is if I want to add things, I have to first remove or make more efficient the things I do now. I can't just do what I do now and these other things. You actually have to do the work to prepare for the new things by better managing the old things. That's where podcast 1547 will definitely help. So if you are dealing with stress, you're not even close to being alone. Literally everyone is stressed. Now, anxiety. Isn't that that's tough. Anxiety is tough. It is very common. It's becoming more and more common in today's culture, partly because people are more willing to talk about it. And then also because we just have a lot more stressors in our life than people did, say, 50 to 100 years ago. Think about the advent of social media and the internet is accessibility. How about that? Good Lord. We're accessible 24/7. And when you work like in any kind of business where people are going to send you emails or pings or text messages or they try to get to you, they can get to you anytime. It is very, very challenging to manage that. Very challenging. If you are struggling with anxiety, we do have podcast 1621, so not too many ago. Podcast 1621, it's a mindset podcast titled Managing Anxiety. and that will help as well. The next thing I have written on my list is just depression and low mood. A lot of times when people reach out to me and they want to get started, believe it or not, it's kind of fun. That's kind of a weird way of saying it, but is they've struggled with just the act of getting started. They know they have a goal. They're depressed and just shut down about what to do, how to do it, whether they can do it. But somehow they got up the energy, the courage to, contact me. And then I reach out. I'm like, well, what are you doing now? And they're like, nothing. I'm like, oh. So it's like, well, how do you eat now? I don't know. I just eat whatever, whenever. What do you do for exercise? I don't. And it's like, ooh, okay. So we're starting from scratch. And then we start talking, and it's like, well, they're depressed. They've tried 1,000,001 diets. None of them worked. They tried exercise, but they hate it. So they're coming into this depressed, but they're like, I don't want to stay here. Here doesn't feel good. Here isn't my best life, but I don't know what to do. So thankfully, by either talking with a client that I've worked with or maybe hearing a podcast or something, they reach out and they say, maybe he can help. Maybe I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to try one more time. And what I love is, like, I recently had a friend of mine. We were talking about, they're a personal trainer, and we were talking about our skill sets as trainers. And they asked me, they said, well, what are your strengths as a coach? And I said, that's an awesome question. And I said, I think that is answered best by a question. So you would ask me, what are my strengths as a coach? And I would say, well, what do you want to achieve? And that's my strength. My strength is, what do you want to achieve? I'll meet you where you are, and we'll build from there, and we'll achieve it. We'll figure out what's the most efficient, most effective, most inclusive manner. How do you still include everything you do in your life? Like, how do we kind of blend it into your life? And we work on trying to accomplish that goal, but add an approach that matches what that person can handle and balances their life priorities and needs in whatever balance they want. So my strength is just, what do you want to achieve? Tell me where you're at, and then I'll take you step by step to how to get there. And that's different than a lot of trainers. A lot of trainers are like, what do you want to achieve? Oh, you want to, do X, Y, Z? Well, then here, do this. But they don't tell you how to make that part of your life. Here's a nutrition plan, eat these foods. And you're like, well, I hate half of them and I'm allergic to half of them. And I can't eat at that time because I have a work meeting. So they'll just give you this thing and say, do it, to adjust to it. That's it. So here is the plan. You adjust to the plan. My strength is, why don't we adjust the plan to you? That's the thing. When people are depressed, when they are just down in the dumps, you want to just start with small steps. Small steps. Small steps. You just want to do one thing better than you did yesterday, better than you did last week. Just anything. And just get the ball rolling, get that momentum going. But you want to start small and manageable. Because when you're depressed, you don't have a lot of excitement. You don't have a lot of willpower. You don't have a lot of ability to overcome. That has to be rebuilt, right? So if you're depressed, if you are dealing with like low moods and just kind of feeling defeated already, that can be very challenging. And that can very much feel like just being overwhelmed in a way, feeling like it's just, why even bother? Feel defeated, right? We do have podcast 1515. That's a mindset podcast titled How to Manage Feeling Overwhelmed, and that can help. And we also have a more recent podcast 1626, which is a Q&A podcast titled Help, I'm Overwhelmed. And that can help. Excuse me. If we look further down, go to our next list, is negative self-talk and limiting beliefs. If you think you're not good enough, if you think you can't, then you can't. Have you ever heard that? If you think you can't, then you can't. If you tell yourself you can't do something, you're going to see all of the things that would make that true. If you tell yourself you can do things, then when you run into something that seems like an obstacle, you're going to say, okay, well, I know I can do it. I just have to figure this out. Then you figure it out. You move on to the next thing. You run into another wall, and you're like, okay, I know I can do this. I just have to figure this out. If you don't think you can, you can't. If you think you can, you can. How you think is how you act. If you think that you're a badass in the making, the world just doesn't know it yet, then you will act as a badass, and you will make the world know it. If you think you're a failure, you won't even try, and when you do try, the first obstacle you run into, you'll just quit, because you're a failure, right? So self-talk is incredibly, incredibly important. We have podcast 758. It's a mindset. It's a Q&A podcast titled "Managing Negative Self-Talk." Very good podcast. Very, very, very good. Okay. You can definitely learn more about that and try to reframe how you view yourself and how you view the challenges you face, so you can learn that you are able to overcome them. You've just maybe tried only one or two ways. Try another way. Learn more, talk to more people, figure out more things. Just keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. We talked about in podcast 1678 that failure is only when you stop trying. Work on negative self-talk if you feel like you have that. Work on fighting against it. Work on trying to address it. You're much more of a badass than you realize. If you went through the history of your life and thought, okay, what things have I overcome? What things have I done that before I did them, I was like, oh, I probably can't do this, or I didn't think I'd be able to do that. And then all of a sudden you could. You did. There's going to be things in your life that you have done that were maybe against your will. But after you did them, you're like, holy crap. I did that. I survived that. I've done that. That's now a new normal for me. As crazy as this sounds, like I used to teach at the local university. I taught for like 7 years. And some of the kids that I would teach, they would never have had, like, say, a 40-hour week job yet. And I remember, I taught an 8 a.m. weight training class pretty much every year. And the kids would come in at 8:01, 8:02, 8:05, 8:10. And they would get frustrated because I would mark them late. Now, my class starts at 8. I mean, that means it starts at 8. It doesn't mean show up at 8. That means it's starting at 8. So you need to show up and be ready at 8 o'clock. So if they were late, if it was 8:01 and they came walking in, they got marked tardy. That makes me a total a-hole, I'm sure. But you think through a whole semester, 14 weeks, and you're like, well, what happens, things in life if you can't control? How many times in 14 weeks has stuff come up that you can't control? 1, 2, maybe 3 times? If someone's late every single time, if they're late 21 out of 28 classes, that is not because things came up. That's because they didn't account for showing up on time. So all of a sudden, I would put them under, pressure. And then all of a sudden they'd start showing up on time because they're like, holy crap, this dude isn't joking. And 2 tardies equals 1 absence. And if you missed a certain number of absences, you would automatically fail the class. So there was now pressure. As goofy as this sounds, as small as this sounds, all of a sudden, within 2-3 weeks, everybody started coming at 8 o'clock. Everybody actually started coming at 7:55 because we started at 8. There was a standard that was set. There was a standard that was not going to move. And all of a sudden, they developed the ability to handle it. And part of what I told him was I said, when you have a job and you start work at 8, it does not mean that you can show up at 8. It does not mean that you show up at 8:05, 8:10. I remember when I used to work construction. If we were going to a job site and we were leaving at 8, you showed up at 8:05, everyone was gone already. They were already in the vehicles. They were going to the work site, right? So there is no leniency when you get out into the quote unquote real world. And I could see in them that they could develop that ability. I know that's just a very small example, but there are so many things that you have done in your life that you've developed the ability to meet a demand. And now that's your new norm. So you have already been successful at changing. You've been successful at kind of developing yourself to meet a new standard. You've already done it. So if you're struggling with negative self-talk, don't focus on the things that you maybe haven't been able to do in the past. Start telling yourself of all the things you did do. Remind yourself that you're a badass and you've changed and you've done things that you didn't previously think you could do. You have. So focus on the good things. Focus on the successes of your life. Don't qualify them. Say, well, that's not really that big. Shut up. Don't make it big, small, important, not important. Just list it. You're going to find that list is pretty damn long already. Okay. The other thing I know that people struggle with is social norms or peer pressure, kind of fitting in. And that can be challenging in the sense that, if you have a spouse that doesn't participate in healthy habits, that's going to be very challenging because you're going to need to kind of do what you need to do regardless of what they do. And that can be very challenging. It can also be challenging at work. Maybe your job, they have you go out to drinks. I have one client that's in sales, and he has to go out and meet people and hobnob and do drinks and whatnot 2 to 3 times a week. And he's like, dude, I want to stop drinking so much because I want to get healthier, but I don't know what to do. I feel like if I order a diet drink or a non-alcoholic drink, that people are going to feel like it's going to negatively impact sales. And that's interesting in the sense because I can understand that is true, but it's true in part. What I mean by that is whether you drink what they drink or you don't drink what they drink, that's 1%. 1% of everything else that's going to happen in that meeting. You can still have a great handshake. You can still have great eye contact. You can still do what's called active listening, where when they talk, you respond with what they've told you and you ask more questions. You engage. You make them feel like the center of attention. They're not going to care what you're drinking if you take care of the other 99%. Make your impression in other ways. Step up your game, So that's what that client and I talked about is there are ways in which being with others, peer pressure and all those things can have an impact on us in the sense that we probably want to account for it. But we don't have to succumb to it. We do have kind of we have a podcast 1452, for example. It's a nutrition podcast titled Balancing Eating Healthy with Social Events. So that can help. We also have podcast 1350. It's a mindset podcast titled Managing Lack of Social Support for Your Goals. So if you don't have social support, if you feel alienated, if you feel alone, that can be very helpful. So that is something that people struggle with. That is a challenge that people do face. I hope through podcast 1678 and today's podcast that you can see that all of these issues are things that are common, that are things that other people also struggle with, but they are things that people have overcome, and they've still been successful in spite of these things. None of these things will prevent you from being successful if you're willing to work on them. If you believe that they can be worked on. I know they can be. It's whether you believe that you can work on them. The limiting factor of whether or not you're successful is going to be whether you continue to try. And continue to try more things, new things. Be outgoing in the sense of, if I'm trying the same approach, and it doesn't seem to be working, no shit. If it didn't work the first 2 or 3 times, it's probably not going to work the third or fourth. You got to find a new way. You got to find another option. So talk to other people who maybe have been successful. Talk to other people who are professionals in that area. Go read books. Watch videos on YouTube. Find podcasts. Just immerse yourself in the information. Find new options. Things that you haven't tried yet. And try them. You can overcome all of these things to be your best self. Just keep pushing. Keep trying. Stay active. Just don't quit. If you want any help outside of the podcast that I mentioned, always reach out. My email is brutalironjim@gmail.com. I'm always here, always happy to help. I love the ability to be able to help people and just being available for people. So if you need anything, my email is brutalironjim@gmail.com. If you like our podcast, please share it. The more people we share the podcast with, the more people we can help. That's the whole point of the podcast, just help as many people as we can. Thank you to those who donate to support the podcast financially. You can donate on our website, www.brutalironjim.com, even just $5 a month or one time, like $20 gift. Anything you can give just goes towards the hosting costs so we can continue to do this every single day. Thank you very much. If you like the information we share in our podcast, you can find more from us on our social media channels. You can find us and follow us on social media, on Instagram and on YouTube under the name Brutal Iron Jim. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.